Howdy, guys and gals, and welcome back to your favorite podcast, That Would Be Rad, the podcast that majors in 80s and 90s nostalgia, comic culture, all things paranormal, and minors in retro video games, tabletop RPGs, all things spooky, pre-internet mysteries, and raising our kids to be half as cool as we were back in the 80s. I'm your spooky host, Tyler Bentz, and this is your other ghastly host.
Ghastly?
Ghastly.
Okay. Woody Brown.
All right, we're in it.
Now, ghastly kind of implies that I've been eating too many pinto beans, you know?
We're in it, pal. Ghastly.
Okay. Man, it's finally here, dude.
It's here.
Halloween this week.
Mm-hmm. It went fast, didn't it?
Yeah, man, too fast. Time is going by way too fast now.
Yeah.
We got to slow it down.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, we can, I guess our contribution to slowing time down and kind of putting our mark on the world is this show, and most specifically, our Halloween Spooktacular.
Oh, yeah. It is a yearly tradition that we both really, really love. And honestly, I've said it before, but it is probably the reason that we have a show just in general.
Right.
You know?
I mean, just one of the reasons, sure. I will say this, too. Every year we've kind of done something slightly different, but in the same vein. And this year we had something planned, and that is that we were going to have some listener stories and all that kind of stuff, but we decided to pivot. Not because we didn't get plenty of awesome stories, which we do. So many of them, though, we wanted to kind of sprinkle into the year and sort of highlight on their own. That, plus, well, Tyler brought a topic to my attention and said we should finally do it. And speaking of reasons why we do this show, I'm pretty sure that what we're talking about today is something that you told me about right when we were just even talking about what kind of stuff would we ever talk about on a podcast anyway.
Oh, yeah.
This is one of the big ones.
Yeah. In my opinion, this is in the top 5 of all time regarding ET encounters. But it kind of encompasses a lot of stuff. There's a lot of high strangeness sprinkled in. Yeah. There's one thing which is kind of on brand for this year's sort of spooktacular theme is that sort of little bit of Appalachia, a little bit of sort of that country, a lot of Manly Wade Wellman vibes. And this just goes right along.
Yeah, I mean, it's got so many of the elements that not only do we love in general, whether it's, some sort of being from somewhere else, another planet, another dimension, another time, perhaps, something that looks unique in comparison to other things that we're used to when we think of quote unquote aliens or creatures. So it's got a unique look. You've also got the environment that it's in. It kind of reminds me of, well, I'll tell you what, instead of talking about what it reminds me of now, why don't we get started and dive right into this spooky tale of the Kelly-Hopkinsville Goblins. Okay, folks, picture this. It's a warm, humid summer night in 1955. The kind of Kentucky night where the air feels thick. And the only sounds are the rustling of trees and the occasional chirp of crickets. The Sutton farmhouse sits tucked away in the rural town of Kelly, Kentucky, surrounded by fields and isolated from the outside world. Inside, it's your typical family scene for that time. A family gathered together, probably winding down from the day's work. But as the sun sets, this peaceful, quiet night is about to take a sharp turn into something terrifying. Something that would leave the Sutton family and the town of Hopkinsville utterly shaken for decades to come. It all begins with a strange light in the sky. It's just past dusk when Billy Ray Taylor, a friend of the family, steps outside to fetch some water from the well. He glances up and spots a glowing object streaking across the sky. At first, it looks like a shooting star, but this thing moves differently. It's fast, it's erratic, and before he can even blink, it's descending towards the ground. He watches as it dips lower, skimming just above the trees before disappearing behind a ridge a quarter-mile away. Billy Ray, wide-eyed and buzzing with excitement, rushes back into the house to tell everyone what he just saw. And I can imagine how that went. They probably thought he was pulling their leg. It's the 1950s, and the little green men were just stuff of comic books and radio dramas, not real life. But Billy Ray was adamant, insisting that something was out there. Now, it is worth mentioning that this was a tight-knit, no-nonsense kind of family. These were hardworking people, farmers used to the demands of rural life. They didn't spook easily, which is what makes what happened next even more chilling. As the night deepened, the strange light Billy Ray saw wasn't the only thing out of the ordinary. The dogs outside began to bark uncontrollably, growling and howling as if something was creeping around out there in the dark. At first, the family dismissed it, thinking it was just a wild animal, maybe a raccoon or a possum. But then, that's when they heard it. A low, metallic clink, followed by a shuffling noise, like something was moving through the brush, closer and closer to the house. Billy Ray and Elmer Lucky Sutton, the head of the family, did what all good Southern men do. They grabbed their rifles and stepped outside. Now, imagine this, Tyler. It's pitch black. Mm-hmm. Their hearts are pounding, and the only light they have is the faint glow from inside the house. Mm-hmm. They scan the yard, expecting to see a raccoon again or maybe a stray dog, but what they see seems to be something straight out of a nightmare. Standing at the edge of the yard, just beyond the dim light, is a creature unlike anything they've ever seen. It's small, maybe about 3 feet tall, with long, spindly arms that almost reach the ground. Its skin is shiny, almost metallic, reflecting what little light there is. But the most unsettling part, its face. 2 enormous, glowing eyes, round and unblinking, staring right back at them. Lucky, with his heart racing, raises his shotgun and fires a shot directly at the creature. The sound of the blast echoes through the night, but to their horror, the creature doesn't drop. It doesn't even really flinch. Instead, it recoils slightly, almost like it's been pushed back. Then it scurries off into the shadows, unnervingly fast. But they're not safe. Within minutes, they see more of them. At least 2 or 3, maybe more, creeping around the house, peeking into windows, and tapping on the walls. The family, now in full panic, retreats inside, barricading the doors and windows. The house becomes a fortress, and all they can do is listen. Listening to the eerie scratching sounds, the occasional thump on the roof, the faint whispers of movement just outside their view. Billy Ray and Lucky keep firing, desperate to protect their family, but it's as if these things can't be hurt. The bullets seem to hit, but the creatures only back off momentarily before returning again, almost playful, like they were toying with them. This siege goes on for hours of sheer terror. And here's where it gets even weirder. After what felt like an eternity, the creatures seemed to vanish as suddenly as they appeared. No more tapping, no more scratching. The silence becoming almost deafening. But the family, they don't dare go outside. Instead, they wait, huddled together until the break of dawn. At first light, they make a break for it. They pile into the car and speed to the Hopkinsville police station, frantic, breathless, and trying to explain what just happened. Now, you'd think the cops would laugh them off, right? But no. When the police arrive at the farmhouse, they see the physical evidence of a struggle. Spent shell casings all over the place, bullet holes in the walls and doors. And though they don't find any creatures, something strange lingers in the air. This story, this unbelievable, almost too strange to be true account, quickly becomes national news. The press runs wild with it, dubbing it the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter, and soon the world is buzzing about these eerie, indestructible, quote, goblins from outer space. But one of the most spine-chilling parts is the way the family described the creatures. They weren't typical aliens as we'd think of them today. No, they were far more otherworldly, like something pulled straight from a nightmare, a blend of the familiar and the completely alien. Even today, those who study UFOs and alien encounters still struggle to explain exactly what the Sutton family experienced that night. So ultimately, the question still remains, what really happened on that humid Kentucky night? Was it all a case of mass hysteria brought on by fear of the unknown? Or did the Sutton family really come face to face with something beyond our comprehension?
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality bikes, which might lead to another discovery. Getting back on the saddle isn't always comfortable. Good news is Sierra has massage guns. And chafe wipes, too. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Fever, cough, congestion. When the symptoms keep coming, but you've got to keep going, you can rely on Mucinex Fast Max All-in-One. Just 1 dose of Mucinex Fast Max All-in-One relieves up to 9 cold and flu symptoms, helping you get on with your day. Need cold and flu relief? Get Mucinex Fast Max All-in-One and Done Relief. It's comeback season. Use as directed.
With Ring cameras and doorbells, it's easy to keep every fright in sight. See who's there. Keep your scaredy cats company.
Oh, it's okay, sweetie. I'll be home soon.
And protect your crypt from the real monsters.
Oh, come on. The sign says take 1.
Find dead simple ways to stay connected right now at ring.com.
Isn't the point of traveling to get away from it all? To feel the best you've ever felt? Then maybe you should check out Aruba. You'll spend your time relaxing on cool, white, sandy beaches and floating in healing blue water. You'll meet locals brimming with gratitude for an island that redefines what a paradise can be. When your trip comes to an end, you won't need another vacation because you just had the vacation. That's the Aruba effect. Plan your trip at Aruba.com.
It's a pretty cool place if you're a Martian.
Or a vampire.
You think you really know what's happening around here, don't you?
Is anyone out there? We're fighters for truth, justice, and the American way.
Hey, this is Woody.
And this is Tyler. And you're listening to That Would Be Rad.
And now, back to our show. Before we dive into theories about what we think this is, Tyler, there's a couple interesting things about this case, and that is that there are several sort of variations and details that beyond what you just heard kind of sprinkle in, I don't know, not necessarily a new perspective, but sort of adds to the story. And one of the things about it is because of how quickly the story itself was sort of spread across news.
Yeah, it kind of blew up.
Yeah, and it's hard to sort of determine what was, artistic license and what was like straight from the Sutton's mouth, so to speak. One of the things that I read about was that when they fired those shots, okay, they're on their front porch. And when I'm picturing this house, it's kind of just like, well, I mean, pretty similar to that old barn that you took a picture of and sent me across from where y'all live.
Which, is it not like the perfect spooky barn?
Yeah, yep.
The way the fog is.
Yeah, dude.
You've been making fun of me this whole
Well,
Halloween
it's so funny
season.
because it doesn't, like that barn, I got to see with my own eyes. I don't even believe that's across from your street.
It
Because,
definitely
I
is.
don't remember seeing it.
It's not like in the middle of the neighborhood.
Tell me I'm wrong when I say it looks like something that's from Cleveland, Georgia, not Buford.
Oh, yeah,
Right?
for sure. Well, I mean, I don't live in Buford. I still live in...
Anyway, when they would shoot these creatures, they would kind of like, they emitted sort of, in general, the creatures sort of emitted like a faint glow. Some people think that maybe that was just like the reflective nature of their quote unquote skin. But here's the thing, whenever they shot at it, again, it didn't look like they hurt them, but it would glow a little bit brighter and then dim again.
Yeah, almost like, I can't think of an example, but it's like, there's like some video game.
It reminds me of a force field, man.
Kind of a force field, but there's a video game where it's like if you get shot with like a laser, it's like it hits and then you see like the heat and then it kind of like contracts in the middle.
Because it hit the force field.
I mean, that's not what I'm thinking of, but yeah, similar. It also was said to sound like a gun shooting like an aluminum or like a tin or even like a metal like pot or something.
Yeah. There's so many elements to this story, and I hope you enjoyed it. But it's one of those cases for how humongous it is and how legendary. There's not a whole lot of other crazy stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There is a part of the story that it talks about how I think part of the reason why they just decided to stay inside was I think one of the men, Billy Ray or Lucky, I'm not sure which, kind of stepped off the porch and something grabbed his head.
Yeah.
Because I think at one point they had chased him off with the shots and stuff and it goes away. And then they come back with, more. And then they're on the roof and stuff. There's so much of this reminds me of everything from like the Gremlins.
Oh, yeah.
To the one that we recently talked about. Oh, God, what is it, man?
Oh, the Cisco Grove incident.
Yeah, it reminds me of Cisco Grove.
Yeah. I mean, it's like perfect movie fodder for sure.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's just an incredible, it's easy to visualize this all going down in the backwoods of Kentucky.
Yeah. Also, I got to say, like, and I mean, I'm not going to fully get into like the sort of the debunkers theories just yet, but I think it is important to stress, though, that like these are sort of, backwoods people. Apparently, like at the time, it's said that there was a church in Kelly, there was a few houses, and like that was it. So it's like a pretty, and again, we're talking about 1955. So these people, they probably didn't even have like a TV. They very rural folks, and so my mind immediately goes to, well, obviously they're going to be very well versed in like their surroundings. They probably do a lot of hunting. They probably do a lot of, things outside. I think two of the people are like, they like worked for like a carnival in the area.
Yeah.
And so
Billy Ray's one of them.
Yeah. And so for them to be scared that much says a lot about the situation.
Right.
And
I've always wondered, because I didn't know much about the area, why is it called Kelly-Hopkinsville? If you look up Kelly on a map, I don't know if it's just like a little, what would they call that? Not township, but, it's not even, you can't really, just try it. If you Google map Kelly, Kentucky, listeners.
Yeah, it's not an official town.
Yeah, it just kind of like sort of pops up, but there's no like.
It's just like a little outcropping almost.
It's just like outside of Hopkinsville, which also doesn't look too huge. And
yeah, it's a small town too.
And then just to the east of that is another town called Fearsville. Now, when you name a town Fearsville, you're just asking. You're asking for it, But the thing that I keep on going back to before, I want to talk about, before we get into the theories, I want to just kind of set the scene on how quickly this spread, what kind of sort of media frenzy took place here. To kind of, reiterate what Tyler was saying. These are folks that, this is, 1955. They are farmers. They're hardworking people.
Yeah.
They don't have, especially like the older generation, they didn't have a whole lot of room for just messing around.
Yeah.
Now
No
that's
nonsense.
not to say that never happened and hoaxes couldn't exist because everybody was working. No.
Right.
What I'm trying to say is, and we'll kind of get some more details about these folks, just like a lot of these encounters that we talk about, when you boil it down to the folks that are the ones sort of telling the story and talking about it, they end up like hating the fact that they ever went public with it. They only did so in this case because they were terrified.
Yeah.
They rushed down to the sheriff's office, and I imagine this scene where they just like come in, just frantic and panicky, and the sheriff's like, what on earth? This is also a time in such a small town where everybody knows everybody. I mean, Tyler grew up in a town that is much bigger than this. And you probably couldn't go to the grocery store and make it out of there without seeing everybody.
Oh, yeah, big time. Yeah, also, I would imagine that if they wouldn't have went to the police department, it just would have disappeared into obscurity. Sure. I think that was the reason that it, that journalists were then called out and it, blew up. And I'm sure you're going to get here, but I do love that this is the case where the famous term "little green men" comes from, and I think that's really cool because that's such a. I mean, usually it's used as like a sort of a derogatory kind of like, "Oh, would you see little green men?" kind of thing. But it's such a big thing in like UFO lore and like ET lore that it's interesting that it comes from this case, and that the irony in that is that they never said that they were green at all.
Right.
So
let's dive into like what kind of happened, the magnitude of how quickly this story spread, because I think it's so important, especially now, 2024, potentially, and I think a lot of our listeners have heard this story before and probably love it as much as we do, but there might be some folks that haven't, and if it's a younger audience too, let's put things into perspective. So after that chaotic night, you can only imagine if it happened nowadays how quickly that story would spread. But keep in mind, again, folks, this is 1955. There's no such thing as, social media. MySpace doesn't exist yet.
Nope. And very rural too.
Yeah. And this is where things get a little crazy because the Kelly-Hopkinsville incident didn't just stay a small town mystery. Like I said before, it blew up on a national scale.
Yeah.
Local reporters from the Kentucky New Era showed up at the Sutton farm trying to get any details that they can. Now, before I dive into that, I forgot to mention that although there were reports of of course, the police going up there that first night and seeing these spent shell casings and, some of them reporting they just felt like weird. Nothing other than that in terms of physical evidence. They didn't find a creature. I don't even think they saw footprints necessarily.
See, I thought they did see footprints. Or they saw like sort of like what looked like sort of scuffles in their yard. Or whatever.
Maybe that's what it was. Also, this is interesting. I don't know if this isn't, I don't think in a lot of just like the normal stuff, apparently joined with the police were military police officers.
Yeah,
because there's I think a relatively close military base nearby, and they're all out there searching. And I forgot, this is one of my favorite aspects of the story. Actually, when they get there, they're all kind of on edge because of what they've been told. And one of them, who's kind of like they've made this like perimeter. They're sort of like moving out from the home, you know?
Yeah.
Trying to, in like a search party. And one of them steps on a cat's tail. And the thing like screeches and howls. And they said that, like the guy was like, ah, and they ran out of there. And I remember there's a quote from like one of the young officers that said something along the lines of, I can't tell you how many and how quickly every man's hand was on his gun in his holster, ready to go.
Well, and also, I don't know that you've said this, but this was like this lasted like 4 hours.
Yeah.
Supposedly. So this isn't just like, even like an hour of like fear and terror, and then they hopped in the car. No. This was like 3.5 to like 4 hours of them
being terrorized,
like sitting down, like crouched down in their house, like all their backs together, shooting through their own windows, shooting through their screens and their screen door. Like this is not. And also, I think there's a quote somewhere that I read a long time ago. I didn't really see it when researching here, but it said that like something about the only reason that they even went to the police was they thought that it was like a full-on invasion because there were like 12 to 15 of these things.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just like one or
and
two.
Also like the scratching sounds from outside, the tapping, the bumping.
Oh yeah.
So much
on the
of this,
roof.
Yeah, on the roof.
Peering in windows.
And let's go into that a little bit more after we talk about just like the media frenzy, because I want to talk about those aspects, why it freaks us out, and also other things that it reminds us of, and then just generalized theories that exist about it and what our theories are and stuff like that.
Yep.
So basically the family, the day after, right, the next day, these local reporters go up there to the Sutton farm. They're trying to get any details that they can. I'm not, I don't know if these folks had like a police scanner and they heard, or because it's such a small town, maybe the reporter kind of knew the sheriff and was like, I kind of it reminds me of some sort of like, comic book reporter where he's like, come on, Sheriff, give me something good. And he's like, well, boy, you wouldn't even believe what happened last night. You know what I mean? So they go up there the next day. They meet with the Sutton family. These folks, hadn't slept, dude. They're jittery. They're just traumatized from the whole thing. And instead of the press treating them like these like scared victims, the tone kind of quickly shifted. Suddenly reporters started framing this story like a circus sideshow a little bit.
Yeah.
They started using phrases that now we know, and it's interesting because it's become such a part of our like cultural zeitgeist, like little green men.
Yeah.
It kind of sets the stage for this public ridicule. Even though, like you said, dude, they never even described them as being green.
Yeah, exactly.
And I never thought about this until our show, really.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. Let's wait for it. Let's get into this in the theories. Just remind me when we get there to talk about this media campaign.
Yeah.
The headline writers couldn't resist turning it into something almost comical, and things started to shift. More and more people began to show up at the farm. Strangers, man. People from all around the country hoping to catch a glimpse of these so-called aliens or even mock the family. This was still in the mid-50s, and fear of anything that would be, considered the other, whether it be communist or aliens, was pretty high. And people wanted to believe in something mysterious, but at the same time, they didn't really know how to process it all. Yeah. And so on one hand, they went there out of curiosity and hoping to see something. On the other, it makes it an easy target to make fun of these salt-of-the-earth people in rural Kentucky who must have seen something crazy. You know what I mean?
Well, that, and also bravery comes with, with the daylight. And so it's one thing for by the time, and again, 4 hours, these people are terrified. They get in their car, they drive to the police station. Probably by the time they got back to which I remember the cops coming like in the morning. I don't know that
they I think it was like, I think it could like morning time. Hold on, let me see what that says. I think it is, it was like the break of dawn or something.
Could be early.
Yeah, drove off. Yeah.
But I mean, that it's suddenly you're brave now that you're not in the pitch black in the middle of the woods.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's a little unfair. Like if there was like immediate ridicule, which I don't know that there was. I think that.
Yeah. At first, I think actually the very first article, I think was kind of like kind.
Yeah.
And then it became that later. It sort of began to spin into, ridicule. And of course, that's when all these different, Here's the part that always plants a pretty firm footing into it just being a purposeful hoax.
Mm-hmm.
The Suttons weren't out to seek fortune. They went to the police. They didn't go to the newspaper, for example, first and foremost, the next day.
Yep.
They were deeply shaken by this event emotionally, psychologically, and they just kind of wanted to get back to their, to them, simple lives. They refused money from reporters and tourists who wanted to see the farmhouse or hear their side of the story. I got to be honest, if I'd probably charge admission, I'd be like, yeah, dude, come on. $10.
$10.
But they didn't want that, man. And just like a lot of these cases, they hated the attention. They didn't want to talk about it, eventually getting to the point where they're just like fed up with it and just didn't even like to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But despite the way that they were treated, they never changed their story. Not even once, dude. The details were solid as a rock and always the same.
Yeah. I do think that it's interesting, too, that it's almost like two sort of cases in one, because the first part of the story is, you see Billy Ray, like, who sees, what appears to be some sort of UFO, coming down and then like kind of landing in an area. And I think this was the case. I didn't see it this time, but I think this was the case where they said that, did you find anything talking about that, like, as this thing was coming down, it almost looked like rainbow, like sort of like oil, like, when you spill like gas or oil on your driveway and it looks sort of like rainbow-ish. I think this is the case. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe
I don't remember seeing that.
I thought this was the one, but I don't know. Maybe not. But he did see what appeared to be like a UFO slow moving across the sky, and then what appeared to land somewhere fairly close. So I don't know. I'm not completely married to the idea that they're connected. The quote unquote like goblins are connected to this UFO crash or whatever you want to call it. But it is interesting that like two of these things, one, everything else sort of followed up after he had this sighting of a UFO.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, like some pretty renowned, I think, ufologists, of course, have written about it and investigated and that kind of thing. Okay. Let's just talk about what some of the possible theories were at the time that they were sort of explained by local authorities and stuff like that. The local authorities initially believed that it might have been a case of mistaken identity. The theory was that the Sutton family saw great horned owls because they're nocturnal, large. They have these like glowing eyes when lights hit them, and their talons could be mistaken for claws. But dude, owls don't behave the way that these creatures did. They don't approach humans. They certainly don't withstand gunfire, and they're not out there tapping on windows and doing creepy little dance moves around the yard.
Yeah, there's so much about this that just infuriates me. Like almost, this is maybe the case that like pisses me off the most. Just the theories that like the skeptics have come up with, especially like Joe Nichols, and like I think that's his name. He's like a world-renowned like skeptic, which is within itself like just ridiculous. But it's like, okay, so we're supposed to believe that there's 12 to 15 great horned owls. They're, not really like flying, but they're just like sort of, moving around the yard all at once, all together. And you're telling me for 4 hours of this entire family shooting shotguns, we're supposed to believe that the owls didn't just like freak out and like all fly away, never to be seen again. It's just ridiculous, man. Yeah. And also, like, nothing really lines up. I mean, even the skeptical sort of hypothesis is like, oh, well, it was dark and they're shooting their shotguns and like, it was too dark to like really get a good shot in. And it's like, what are you talking about? These people were like shooting like out of their windows, out of the screen doors, like at these things that were on their porch.
Yeah.
And it sounded like metal or like, shooting like, like tin or like a metal pot.
Yeah.
So none of it lines up to me. I think it's so ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good place to start, right? If you're just trying to think of, okay, like, well, maybe it was this, you know? The interesting thing, too, is like the way that the drawing looks and kind of, you know, especially with like the eyes, you can see, okay, and the ears and stuff. You're like, okay, well, maybe. And owls are kind of crazy, but I'll just give you a personal example. Maybe 2 weeks ago, you know, I think it was like at the same time, it was right after I had edited, I don't know, one of our other spookier kind of episodes. And I was listening to make sure that the sound design was good and all that. And I had to pull off a headphone or an earbud because I heard like an owl. And it was like pretty high up in this tree. And dude, I have such a powerful headlamp. And I pointed it up there and I couldn't find it for the life of me because I thought it would be so cool to see one. And then I was like, but is this a signal that I'm about to be abducted by something? So anyway, I couldn't find it, right? Yeah. The point is, like, even if they would have perhaps accidentally disrupted a nest that was nearby, the great horned owl might act aggressive for a short time. Yeah. But they darn sure would have been scared away by the very first shot, and then that would have been it.
Yep.
You know, even maybe I was thinking, well, maybe there was a nest, and maybe the great horned owl had made a nest on the tin roof or something. I don't even know if the roof was tin. Maybe that's why it felt territorial, you know, because birds will do crazy stuff. Even then, it just doesn't quite line up. And the fact that, you know, again, these folks that witnessed it, there have been some things that people have said, okay, well, this Billy Ray guy was kind of a, you know, he wasn't really necessarily a troublemaker, but he was like a jokester, you know. He was kind of like the laugh of the party. And for the most part, when he came in reportedly and said, hey, I saw this like crazy thing outside, they're like, come on, man, Billy Ray, you're just being crazy again. And then all this stuff started happening. And then they were like, what the heck? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I will say one thing that it did kind of remind me of, even though, I think the owl theory is ridiculous, but when it reached down off like the roof and like grabbed his like hair or his head, it did remind me of like the staircase.
Oh, I know. The fact that there's an owl too. Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of that. That's a, well, we went going to the pool and
had some wine. But yeah, like, I mean, just the idea that, I mean, birds, like, yes, owls and hawks and falcons and stuff, yeah, they're like predatory birds, but birds are still pretty skittish. Yeah. Even the predators, you know? So, like, one shot, especially with like a shotgun within, 5 to 8 feet away, that's it. You're not going to see a bird anywhere around for the rest of the night, for sure.
And they kind of described, too, like the way that they looked. They would have been I don't know. There's so much of it that doesn't seem like they didn't hear a great horned owl. And they have a pretty distinctive thing. In fact, hold on.
Oh, yeah.
I got this really cool app. Now, we're not sponsored by this, but it's called Merlin Bird ID. So anybody that's dorky like myself, dude, listen how cool this is. Imagine Shazam.
Yeah.
But for birds. So in other words, you're outside, you press whatever, it immediately identifies the bird, dude.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's incredible. Anyway, hold on, let's see. Great horned owl. Here we go. This is what they would have heard, okay? And there's not a mention of it, right? Okay, that's not working. Perfect.
Hold on.
Now, anybody that's heard that before knows exactly what it is, right? It's almost like that is the owl sound that we all know, even if we've never heard or lived near where a great horned owl lives. When you say, what sound does an owl make to a little bitty kid, that's what they're going to say, right?
But also, the idea that in 1955, rural, like, outdoorsmen, farmers, if they even had power in the house, probably just got power. You're telling me that they're not going to know what an owl looks like?
Right.
Like, it's so just insulting, I think.
Yeah.
You know? And also there's so many other things, you know, like I think they talk about like one of them got a shot with a shotgun like at close range. It was right on the eave of the house, and he watched it like blew him off the roof, you know, knocked him off the roof, and then he just like hops back up and then just like floats again.
Yeah,
like,
floats, not flies.
Yeah,
floats away.
Yeah, very different things.
Not to mention, aside from that evening, they'd never had problems with the owls.
Yeah, exactly. And they're also saying that like, oh well, the glow that you're seeing, any of the glow that like they're you know, quote unquote like suits or whatever it was, the glow that you're seeing, oh well, that's just like foxfire, a phosphorescent
bioluminescent or not algae.
Yeah, like fungus.
Yeah.
Like on the side of trees. It's like, come on, dude. Like, how many like leaps are you gonna make to try to prove your theory just to debunk it? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. It's there's this odd sort of luminous patch along a fence where one of the beings had been shot, and then there's like a green light in the distance whose quote source couldn't be. Yeah, it was a bioluminescent fungus on decaying wood. Which by the way, like I want some of that.
Yeah, but dude, I've literally lived in rural, you know, Cleveland, Helen, Georgia, my whole life, and I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't exist.
Yeah,
but it's
yeah,
like,
it certainly does. But I'm just saying, like, there's just it's hard because like we're
in one night they see foxfire. A UFO
all these
crash.
different things. Now, again, it goes back to what we talk about often, which is like our minds are very powerful. And I myself, although, you know, I can't say that I've ever experienced something like this at all, or even like on a scale of anything that Tyler has. For me, it's like my imagination has freaked me out before. I mean, dude, the other night when we were playing, D&D, but we were doing like the zombie apocalypse
at
the house. Little things would happen, and we're like, dude, is somebody here?
Yeah.
You know, and we hadn't even like, it was still, dude, it was still daylight.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like your imagination can run wild, and you live out in the woods, and a bunch of different things can happen. Even whenever I'm camping, you know, I'm like, what the heck was that? You know, so I can understand that, but there's so much that doesn't line up with the owls. Why did they think they were made of metal? I've never looked at an owl and thought, made of metal.
Yeah, I've also never seen 12 to 15 giant great horned owls.
Now,
like,
I will say something real quick.
Converging on a house.
I remember the matriarch of this family, the Sutton family. She was kind of outspoken about a lot of stuff. One of them being, we never called them green men. The other being that she never said that there was more than like 3 or 4. So I just remember like reading that. That being said, dude, you can't really, it would be hard, if you're hearing things from all sides, who knows?
See, I thought that Billy, what was the, Lucky and Billy Ray, I heard that they went back and forth on if it was 12 or 15.
Yeah. I just remember reading.
Well, she also didn't go outside.
True.
I mean, she was mainly staying inside with like the kids.
Yeah.
And they were like huddled up.
Yeah. And you kind of reminded me.
We'll return after these messages.
Ford Pro FinSimple offers flexible financing solutions for all kinds of businesses, whether you're an electrician or run an organic farm. Because we know that your business demands financing that works when you need it, like when your landscaping company lands a new account. Wherever you see your business headed, Ford Pro FinSimple can help you pursue it with financing solutions today. Get started at fordpro.com/financing.
Time to move? Skip the hassles of selling during the holiday season and sell your home directly to Opendoor. Request an all-cash offer in minutes, close, and get paid in days. You can even pick your close date so you can move after New Year's. Start your move at Opendoor.com or download the Opendoor app. Opendoor is represented by Opendoor Brokerage Inc., license 02061130 in California, and Opendoor Brokerage LLC in its other markets. Terms and conditions apply.
So, you want to be a marketer. It's easy. You just have to score a ton of leads and figure out a way to turn them all into customers. Plus, manage a dozen channels, write 1 million blogs, and launch 100 campaigns all at once. When that's done, simply make your socials go viral and bring in record profits. No sweat. Okay, fine. It's a lot of sweat. But with HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools, launching benchmark-breaking campaigns is easier than ever. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
There's something out there waiting for us. And it ain't no dead.
Hey, this is Bryce Johnson from the Bigfoot Collectors Club, and you're listening to Tyler and Woody on That Would Be Rad, because that is rad.
Whenever you mentioned that before, like imagine these people just kind of hold it up in this little bitty sort of ranch style.
Almost like a cabin. Yeah.
And having, it does remind me of, I mean, you name it, any movie where you're just like, oh gosh, please let it stop. It's like coming in from all around.
Yeah,
so,
it's like an invasion.
We've talked about the owl theory. We've talked about the bioluminescent fungi. Other people have said the other sort of prevalent. No,
yeah.
The other main theory is just gave up on it. The other main theory is that it was just a group of pranksters. Okay, now hold on. Now,
dumber.
Well, it's dumber, but also, if it was a group of pranksters. Hey, man, how in the world did they survive gunshots?
Yeah, you're telling me these pranksters are, after the first gunshot, over the course of 4 hours, they're like,
let's just keep doing it, dude.
Let's keep doing it. Let's get on the roof.
I got an
now.
idea. Let's scratch the walls.
Yeah, let's jump on the roof.
Yeah.
Scratch the walls. Oh, one of our friends just got shot. And then, oh, weird, he floated up to that tree.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Now, here's the other part that sort of throws that theory into the wind. Guess what, folks? The Suttons weren't the only ones that saw weird stuff that night. There were other neighbors throughout that had no real, familial or any kind of, even more than just, hey, we know of these people, connection to the Suttons that reported seeing these lights in the sky that night.
Oh, wow.
And, I don't know. So that's just something.
That's cool.
Yeah, something to think
I
about.
wonder if it was the same thing that...
It reminds me of, what's the case where the kids see the fireball? Well, it's kind of like Flatwoods in a sense.
Oh, right.
And by the way, like all this whole area, man, the Kentucky, West Virginia, like that area, dude, there's something.
There's some window areas.
Yeah. As we say, as Tyler would say down south, there's something.
There's something out there. I'm glad you brought up the Flatwoods because, like Flatwoods, Project Blue Book would go on to become involved with this. And just like with Flatwoods, J. Allen Hynek, famous guy who was basically, sort of postured to go out to these places and pretty much debunk everything. I mean, he's the reason that, and we've said it before, he's the reason that you have terms like, oh, it must be swamp gas. Oh, it's foxfire. Oh, it's a weather balloon. Oh, it's just a great horned owl. He would come out and say, oh, it was a great horned owl. Case closed. But the interesting thing about him is, as a guy who was sent to all of these sort of anomalous events, he would later go on to be maybe the biggest sort of torchbearer that something is out there. Like he started realizing, like, I can't, if I'm being an honest man, like I can't write off all these things because there's no way. So I think that's a really interesting
It's super interesting because you hear that name and you think, like you just said, you described him as like a big debunker and the reason why we know of certain terms and that kind of thing. What's interesting, and it kind of brings me back to what I was going to say about the newspapers and all the articles that came out, especially since there was military police involved.
Yep.
Especially since there was other witnesses that evening that saw the weird, quote, lights in the sky. It kind of, in a way, reminds me of, well, a lot of these cases, but certainly Flatwoods, where there's a military presence. Don't you feel like it was a intentional campaign to sort of discredit and or turn it into a silly story about these people?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Because it certainly feels that way,
Yeah. Well, and there's also, I'm kind of going off a lot of what's just like, I kind of remember, but wasn't there some like sort of mysterious like general or something that showed up?
No,
But then they would like, years later, they went back to like try to find him and like they couldn't find this guy like as being like any sort of something colonel or something.
The problem too is there's a bunch of like conflicting info, and again, I feel like even that might be a purposeful thing. It's hard to kind of go back and, you know what I mean? It's kind of like all these misdirects, because in some articles they talked about Air Force investigators showing up, and then in others they talked about Army, for military police from the Army coming to investigate and stuff. There's not an Air Force base nearby, but there is an Army base nearby.
Right.
And so it starts to get a little like muddled.
Well, I think the guy that I'm talking about, I think he was like a colonel from like the Air Force. And I don't think he was with the military police, but something like I think his name was in the original like paper, like the first sort of story that hit like the newspapers. But then years later when it, like UFO researchers and stuff, they went on to find out that like this guy didn't exist. Like there was no guy in the Air Force in the area that had that name that was a colonel.
Wow.
Yeah. But also I will say, I am willing to say that if there was like military police or even like there was, somebody from the Air Force, I'm willing to say that maybe they were already there because of the UFO scene. I mean, for all we know, that could have been terrestrial. That could have been a craft, kind of like what we were talking about with Flatwoods, because didn't they get there in time? Because like no, that was a different case where there was like a military craft that was like a top secret thing, and they arrived like on the scene like, an hour later, and they shut it down. What was it? Oh, the Kecksburg, the Kecksburg like bell or the acorn. Remember?
Yeah.
Hear more about this on That Would Be Rad, Season 4, Episode 9, The Kecksburg UFO Incident.
And so they were like tracking, almost like a NORAD kind of thing. They were tracking it, and so that's how they were able to be there so fast. And I think that was probably our military. And I wonder if that's how either the military police or anybody from the Air Force was able to show up so fast. With this story.
I mean, I'm so glad you said that, dude, because that's what it feels like immediately. You've got this small town. Why are there 4 MPs coming out there?
Right. Now, I don't think the Goblins, I don't think the MPs were there because of the Goblins at all. I think that's something probably totally different.
Really? Like you're saying the military police were there because of, or let's just say military presence.
Right.
Was there because of the first thing that happened, the lights.
Yeah, I'm willing to say that the light could have been a military secret, kind of like the Kecksburg UFO.
You're saying you don't think, okay, and you don't think that the we'll just call them goblins.
Yeah.
You don't think the goblins
were connected?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not like totally saying that. I mean, I think there's definitely, it's like a 50-50. I think they're definitely able to be connected to this UFO, crashes in like a gully nearby.
Yeah.
But I also think that it could be 2 totally separate things also, and it just so happened to be like synchronicity that like these guys were already in the area and they're like, oh, wow, what is this? Like, let's go investigate, you know?
Yeah, for some reason, and it's probably a good time to talk about what we think about it all. One quick point on J. Allen Hynek is that I've always kind of gotten the vibe from him that he was the sort of government official that was hired because of his credentials. He's like an astronomer, he's a professor, you know, very well educated.
He was also very like, almost like mechanical, they say, like very to the point.
Yeah, and I feel like he was brought in to say those things publicly.
Yep.
So that it would quickly be dismissed.
Yep.
All the while collecting the data. So he's kind of like doing two things at once. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. 100%.
And I feel like that kind of is the vibe, especially how quickly this story spread. Although, sure, at the time, early 1950s, mid 50s or whatever, it's kind of like, you know, you've got this sort of, what do you call it? Nuts and bolts, UFOs and robot alien kind of movies and that kind of stuff. And so there's maybe just like a hint of, you know, desire for these kind of stories, and, you know, that's going to sell the newspaper, and that's going to make the newspaper money, and yada, yada, yada. But there's just something about it that feels like misdirect information campaign like crazy because they knew something was happening. And I feel like for me, when I start thinking about what do I think it is, if we can kind of put aside the family of owls, if we can put aside Billy Ray and maybe, you know, some costumes that he might have found at the carnival that he worked at, if we can put aside the fact that it might just be other mischief makers, then I start to think about my thoughts would be that these quote unquote goblins came in on some sort of craft or whatever, and that's what Billy Ray saw out there. The military's been tracking it on because I'm trying to think, like, what's their capability in 1955 radar-wise?
I mean, I don't know if they have like a NORAD type.
Yeah, they had.
thing.
They had permanent system radar stations used for manual air defense systems. So anyway, I think that, you know, maybe they have been tracing this thing for a while, and they could kind of pinpoint based on its trajectory where it would potentially be. And then those creatures were able to kind of just escape. And I feel like, I don't know about you, other than the one grabbing the head or whatever, I kind of feel like they weren't really like trying to be mean, dude.
Yeah, that's the
they didn't really make any aggressive moves or anything.
Yeah. I mean, and we've talked, so, you know, now that we're talking about getting into like theories, I'm glad you said that, because so many times on this podcast, we talk about these sort of events of high strangeness. I mean, even down to like me seeing my own shadow man, you know, it's like, it was absolutely terrifying, sort of floated across the room, came out of the closet, but then he just stood there, and just absolute fear on my part, but never really like did anything. So it is like that thing of like, well, what were they trying to accomplish? You know, what was the point of like kind of like floating down from the trees, getting shot at, falling off a roof or floating back up into the tree? It was weird behavior that almost feels like it was just trying to sort of invoke some fear response.
See, for me, I think of it as, imagine that like you knew humans' weapons and their capabilities were like inferior and couldn't harm you.
Oh, right.
You wouldn't really display any like fear. You'd kind of just be like, oh man, I just wanted to see. But you've heard about these humans. You've never actually seen one.
Yeah.
You know, to me, it just seems more like they had just a bunch of curiosity, man. And they were just kind of like, I want, you know, hey, how's it going? I am friend. And not really, I feel like if they were doing something to, I don't know, attack or something like that, someone would have gotten hurt, they would have done more to get inside, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I do think that it's interesting. So, and I don't know, maybe my opinion on this has changed a little bit after watching and being a big fan of like Hellier. You got to watch it. It's really cool. Yeah. There's things that,
because isn't the premise like essentially they're going out there to investigate something similar to this?
Yes. And the thing that kind of sucks is like that's sort of the impetus of the whole show, but it kind of
just take a bunch of turns, right?
Yeah, it kind of turns into a different thing, which there are things that I kind of don't. It's not that I don't like it. It's just that I wish that it would have stayed on the tracks as far as that, because to me that's fascinating. Yeah, basically they get this obscure email from this random address, and it's basically this guy in Kentucky who has a family, and they claim that like for the last year, 2 years or something, that it's just almost common, like every few nights they're seeing these like little goblins, and they believe that they're coming from this like cave that's like on their back property, which again, to me, that's fascinating. I think that stuff's awesome. And I do like the idea of it being a sort of leaning less into like extraterrestrial coming on a craft, like you said, and more maybe like Hollow Earth. Maybe there's some sort of portal kind of thing in the cave, dimensional kind of travel thing. I really like that. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating, and I like it because it is like the Flatwoods case. It is like just straight up high strangeness, in the sense that, like the Flatwoods monster, they don't look like anything that we could like think of. Like, from their accounts, again, like take the great horned owl aspect out of it, but from their claims, these things have, they're anywhere from, I think they say like 2 feet to 4 feet. It kind of ranges in size, I think, between the two guys in their accounts. And, they have these giant, almost like, not really like ears. I mean, I guess kind of ears. And then these huge, like glowing yellow, glowing orange eyes. They have these arms that almost go all the way down to their feet. And so it's just super weird. And again, like the Flatwoods case, which looks like almost like a robot thing with like what looks like a dress, kind of like,
yeah.
It's just weird stuff. And again, it's like, I think the important thing is to look through the lens of the time. The Flatwoods case happened in like the early 50s, I think 51, 52. And then this happens in 1955. Also, I think it's good to note that, J. Allen Hynek, who also, hit the Flatwoods case, this was at the beginning of Project Blue Book, which started in like anywhere between like 47 and 50, with it really like getting off the ground and becoming sort of its own like official entity within the Air Force. And so it's cool because it does fall under that period where J. Allen Hynek maybe hadn't changed his paradigm yet, where he was like, I can't lie about this anymore. There is something to this. So this would have been in the early days where, he was this no-nonsense guy, and he's sent out there to debunk and just shut down all these things, which I think it's a really interesting aspect of this case.
Yeah. It's also just so fascinating to me that...
We will return after these messages.
America's future can be determined by our dreams and our visions.
It was very intense, bright light.
For over 200 years, there have been reports of giant man-like creatures.
From another dimension, another world, I don't know.
The most intriguing mystery on the North American continent.
This is Joshua Cutchin, and you're at my home for weirdness. That would be rad.
I don't know, man. Just putting myself in those people's shoes, and I don't know. I mean, it reminds me of stuff, and I didn't really, prepare this in terms of research, but it does remind me a lot of the stuff that you read about in Passport to Magonia by Jacques Vallée, and in other books. I'm sure like a Jerome Clark book about, different types of sort of humanoid creatures. They're these stories of small creatures living in, everything from cave systems of the mountains. I mean, this folklore exists even in like Cherokee legends and other Native American and even sort of like First Nations people up in Canada. So you read about different types of these kind of creatures. Mm-hmm. And perhaps this was just one of those nights, whatever night that was. And I don't, it was, do you remember what the actual, was it June?
Oh, no, it was August 21st.
Okay. I was
going to
say,
know that because my birthday is June 21st.
Yeah. And so I was hoping that it would have been June 21st because then I could, make that connection with the fact that even in like old sort of pagan belief systems, like that time period is pretty close to when things like, can kind of come around.
Yeah,
so
it's the summer solstice. It's the longest day of the year. Or no. June 21st is because that's my birthday. Longest day of the year, summer solstice, first day of summer. It's on like a cusp, which makes it like a, sort of energy charged date. Right. If you look at it through like sort of occult kind of practices.
Another interesting fact about this area is this Kelly-Hopkinsville area in 2017 was one of the only places in the U.S. that had the full solar eclipse. Isn't that wild?
Wow.
Yeah.
And man, good find.
I saw some stuff online where it was talking about how they were like, are they going to return? They thought, maybe the Hopkinsville Goblins would make an appearance, but I wasn't able to find any reports of that happening.
Wow, that's really cool.
But a really cool sort of synchronicity, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Which, I mean, again, it couldn't, a UFO sighting, goblins, that's fascinating.
And while, it's spooky and to me perfect for Halloween and stuff, what's amazing and part of the reason why I was just like, we got to pivot and do this one is because of how significant this case is. And interestingly enough, before we even talked about doing our show in general, I had actually never heard of it, so it exists. And for people that never really look into this stuff or read about it or are entertained by it, they don't even know. And it's like, this is one of the first cases ever where alien beings were described not as sort of like humanoid with big eyes and big heads, but as something more goblin-like, more otherworldly. Yeah. It's easier for me to kind of think of them as creatures that exist and have existed, that sort of just have found a way to sort of hide than them being aliens, honestly.
Right.
If it wasn't for the lights in the sky kind of thing, then, I probably wouldn't even think of
that
them
connection
in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I do wonder if, and a lot of, I mean, who knows, the Hellier thing, a lot of people sort of, say, oh, that's like totally fake. And maybe it is fake, but there are so many sort of accounts of this, these sort of goblin-like creatures, if you will, like coming out of caves. I mean, it dates back to, 1700s. You hear of people seeing these things in the mines. I mean, I think that's where like even like the Tommy knockers, I think that's like where that sort of initiates, where like they make these noises like far in the mines and it lures the miners like further in, to their doom kind of thing. But I do like that like hollow earth theory, inner earth, whatever. But it's fascinating that these things like maybe live down there. I cannot think of the stinking name, but like we've talked about it before, and his name's like, I cannot think of his name, but it's this writer that wrote for like maybe like Fate magazine or Amazing Stories or whatever, where he talks about having these like visions. The second Clay hears this, he's immediately going to know. It's like the doggo and the, God, what is it called? Why can I not think of this? Anyway, it's his whole idea was like beneath like New York City were these like underground like sort of catacombs of like these like there's like good ones and then bad ones.
Yeah, and then there's like literally ones in Italy that are just like short and hairy, and I'm like, come on, guys.
Oh yeah. Well, no, I was just gonna say I just sent you a picture, and if for all of our Pokemon fans out there, which my daughter and I have recently started an obsession with the cards, you will recognize a character called Sable Eye was directly influenced by these goblins, which is pretty cool.
And I've always said that, well, let me say this too. Yes, it's interesting, just the references in pop culture and stuff. In the movie E.T., there's a scene where the mom's reading a newspaper article about little green men. It's like a nod to the case. We all know that Spielberg was fascinated by this stuff.
Right.
Even the design, apparently, for the aliens in the movie Critters was somewhat influenced by it, and the way that they come in and sort of attack this family at their house.
I don't really see the visual for that.
No, visually it doesn't look like it at all.
I mean, maybe
just
like
kind of like the inspiration for like big eyes, a mouth, and just,
kind of like diminutive little creatures. I mean, I guess, yeah.
Something cool to promote the town of Kelly. Every year they hold this Kelly Little Green Men Days Festival.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which celebrates all things extraterrestrial.
That's cool.
It's kind of weird if you think about it. Something like
no, it's awesome, man.
So terrifying.
Yeah.
For a family has sort of evolved into a celebration, but I guess that's kind of putting a positive spin on it.
I mean, it's like the Mothman Festival, which we've got to get up there.
I know, we got to get up there.
I mean, the fact that we haven't done it yet is kind of embarrassing. Yeah, I love when these like little small towns, they really lean into it, and because at the end of the day, it's like, something like this or Mothman in Point Pleasant. I mean, even I think there's a festival at a museum for what we were just talking about. Flatwoods, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that's really, really cool.
And I drove by there, and they were closed that day.
Yep. One thing, too, that this case reminds me of is, I mean, I know it's totally different, but it does remind me of like the Ape Canyon incident.
Oh, yeah, dude. I'm so glad you brought
Big
that.
time.
I completely forgot to mention it. Mm-hmm.
Hear more about this on That Would Be Rad, Season 1, Episode 20, The Ape Canyon Incident.
But it's interesting because it's very similar, but then at the same time, like, it's totally different in the respect of, like, instead of this hulking behemoth giant Bigfoot attacking, it's like these weird, kind of non-threatening, but also I do feel like, because you do, like, whenever you look into this case, you do see a lot that, oh, well, these things didn't really do anything. They didn't, the closest thing it did to being sort of malevolent was, reach and grab the guy's hair or like, the top of his head or whatever off the roof. But I do feel like there's got to be more. I guarantee, like, if you were able to talk to those people now, I guarantee there was other things about this story where it seemed like they were a lot more scary than what's sort of reported. Because apparently, like, when they got to the police, they were like, "We need your help. We're being attacked." Like this is an invasion, basically.
Yeah. And I will say the police definitely made mention that when they got there and when they talked to the family and stuff, to them, using their own sort of discernment, which many officers have a pretty good sense of when people are like just making stuff up.
Right, yeah.
They seemed really genuine, and they seemed genuinely terrified about what went on. So the Ape Canyon incident and this one really, I think, are perfect examples of how they are contrasted to me in terms of how the creatures sort of acted. I'm sure it was terrifying, but there's a difference between these goblins weren't actively trying to get inside necessarily. Right. They might just been like crawling around outside, I mean, I've had, an animal on my roof before, and it sounds like that thing weighs 1,000 pounds. You get up there and it's just like a little baby possum.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So.
And I'm sure it was a tin roof.
Right.
Which, amplifies all that.
Right.
Still scary, though, for sure.
Oh, for sure. And when folks see the, I guess, drawing or picture of this creature, you'll understand when I say this. Flatwoods is my ultimate
it's
favorite
awesome.
Because I just love the way it looks.
It's so weird.
It's just so weird and cool and unique, and I just love it.
Yeah.
This has to be my number one sort of creature.
Yep, I agree.
Look, it's like, it's kind of like that trailer that you told me to watch. It's like cute.
Yeah.
I'm not throwing shade on the folks that shot at it, because if you don't know what it is, who knows?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so I'm not blaming them for doing that. I would have probably done the same thing.
Oh, for sure, dude. And I mean, like I said at the top, like, you know, bravery comes with the daylight. So we're not seeing it, you know, through the lens of being
unless your blinds are open, and then
I mean, that would never happen. So
yeah, of course not in our house.
No, one thing that you mentioned earlier, which I think is a really good point. You mentioned like the Cisco Grove encounter, where, you know, for our new listeners who may not have heard it,
Hear more about this on That Would Be Rad, Season 4, Episode 26, Aliens in the Forest, the Cisco Grove Incident.
It's, you know, a guy is basically like up in a tree and he's like, you know, shooting arrows. He's like throwing rocks and sticks at, you know, I guess like the quote unquote like robot of the group. You had these sort of more organic beings, and then you had more mechanical types. And I think it is interesting that the mechanical one almost had no fear of anything that he was doing. Like even when he shot the arrow at first, it hit him. And again, this is similar to this. It made like a spark and lit up, and he kind of like backed up, but then he immediately like came back. And so I think that's a good parallel to this case. Because, because, you know, it is this, you know, anytime they shot, they're seeing like sparks, or they're seeing like something light up. And then, you know, 5 minutes later, it's like sort of floating down from the tree, coming closer again. Like, you know, like, oh, well, I know what you're capable of, and I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities, man. Even the fact, like, the first one he shoots at the Cisco Grove incident, shoots it kind of like gets pushed back.
Yeah.
Then then more come, and the difference being really that, you know, of course, they were more mechanical in description, and, you know, potentially try to shoot him with some sleeping gas. But there were, like, even behaviorally, like when I was reading this and getting ready for the show, like I thought, man, this really reminds me of that. There's even like, there's that silvery quality. There's the like, the clanking sound that's made whenever something like, you know, ricochets off of it, kind of.
Yeah, right.
So there are a lot of similarities, man.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's I don't know, same creature, different place, different race of the same, I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, and I mean, I didn't even think about this, but the Cisco Grove incident, they saw something, a UFO in the sky, land nearby.
Yeah, about the same kind of distance too, man.
Dang, man. What year was that?
Wild, right? Yeah, I think it was like 1964.
Yeah.
If memory serves.
Yeah, so I mean, not too far, you know.
Yeah.
You know, less than 10 years, so.
What if it was like these goblins are the things that are like driving the suits, like they're inside of them, and they're like, oh man, I told you we should have brought the suits. You know?
Yeah, like a mech suit or something.
Yeah. I mean, all in, you know, the most haunting part of this entire legacy isn't like the media buzz and how quickly and was there military involvement to like shut it down. Even the UFO investigators that spent decades and decades trying to dissect the case, and there's so many like pieces of info and theories and all this kind of stuff. For me, it's that this family, to like the last day, their dying day, they never sought fame. They never profited from this story. They just wanted people to believe that something truly unexplainable happened to them that night. And it's like, dude, that's the reason why I was so ready to close out our spooky season with this, because that's the terrifying part of it. The terrifying part to me goes beyond like the physical element of it. It's the psychological impact of having something so crazy happen to you.
Yeah.
And trying to explain it to somebody else, only to either be not believed or ridiculed for it later. That's just, you know, imagine that, you know, and not to mention just like memories of how scary and horrific it would have been for all those things to be happening. 3 to 4 hours just must have seemed like an absolute lifetime.
Oh, dude, yeah. I mean, like the Cisco Grove, I mean, you know, you're not really seeing like an end in sight. And I mean, that's pretty scary. I mean, probably like the Ape Canyon incident too, you know, it's like, this is just going to go on, you know, they're just going to outlast me, and that's it. With this case, I think it's important to note too that, you know, they talk about, and I'm not really sure about like chronologically how it works, but I do know that they were talking about how these things were like scaring the kids, but because they were like peering in the windows and stuff, which
that's right. Yeah.
That's terrifying. I mean, and so,
that's why you keep, hey guys, I'm going to say it until I'm blue in the face. Close your blinds.
Yeah.
Keep them closed.
Keep them closed. Just like, wood, like
just paint your windows black.
Just paint them up. Yeah. But no, I don't think it ever really says, the sort of the timeline of what all actually happened. But, to me, like in my brain, sort of filling in the gaps, it's like, did the kids see them first? Were they losing their minds, going to the adults and saying, there are these monsters looking in my window, and then, then the adults are like, oh, maybe we should take this serious, and then then it all kind of, escalates from there. But yeah, it's a creepy story that I think is perfect for the Halloween season, and it lines up perfectly with sort of that Appalachian, out in the woods kind of thing. And it being in the 50s doesn't hurt.
I agree. I mean, another thing that I love about this story as we're kind of wrapping up here is that it kind of falls in line with a lot of the things that we've been talking about throughout this season. And I think maybe like each year we kind of find a new thread that we can kind of connect to a lot of these things. And this year, honestly, maybe some last year, it's really sort of this idea that there are and maybe were creatures that existed either pre-human or that just exist out there.
Yeah.
And at different points in time, man, I don't know what their intentions are. Are they trying to just coexist? Are they trying to just observe us because maybe they can only, come out at a certain time of year? Maybe, we're so dangerous as a fellow creature that lives on the same plane or whatever that they just kind of hide away. I don't know.
Well,
it's because I've been reading this Manly Wade Wellman book, The Old Gods Awaken, and I'm like, I think I have like 10 pages left, which is just killing me. But it's interesting because it talks a lot about like these old creatures in Cherokee folklore, but in also just like Appalachian folklore in general, where people have heard of these things. And not just that though, like in Ireland and Scotland and England and these areas of the world that, quote unquote far older than what we have here in America in terms of written record, we'll say. So it's interesting to me because you look at these creatures and you think, maybe they just thought like, oh man, this is our chance to kind of hey, did you see that thing in the sky? Yeah, sure did. Let's go take a look. Maybe it's these people in this house that did it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right.
I'm just saying, like, it makes me think of all these different creatures. We talk about the Fomorians. We talk about all these different things that are, part human or maybe not human enough. And there's this really cool quote that I read in this Manly Wade Wellman book. But you know what? I just decided I'm not going to share that because I think that quote serves better for an episode where we have a creature that, does attack.
Yeah. I agree. It's funny you said Fomorians because I kind of had thought of that too. It's just those weird, again, just sort of the high strangeness creatures that, seen through the lens of the time, with like the Flatwoods and with these guys like back in the 50s. Or 60s, and just the idea that like coming up with, oh yeah, we saw these goblins that bullets bounced off of them, and the idea that like your quote unquote like redneck from Kentucky would just come out of that, that it would just come up with that is just it's almost like to me like sort of the high strangeness aspect is like it's almost just too weird to even. To think that it was just like made up. You know what I mean?
It'd be a different story too if they were just like writing books, making tons of money off of it and that kind of thing, then it would make sense.
Yeah.
But somebody that just doesn't want it, they're like, please just leave us alone. We don't even want any money. No, we won't tell you our story. We refuse the money. That it just doesn't line up, man.
No.
They're going to get so much attention and not want it. If you're not making money off it, then why the heck would you do it?
Yeah, because all you're really getting out of it is ridicule.
Yeah, ridicule, anguish, turmoil. You're having to go around this same small town where everybody knows you, and now you're quote, those people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
which really sucks. I mean, it's pretty unfortunate. Well, another thing that's unfortunate is that Halloween, the spooktacular season is over.
Yeah.
But we hope you enjoyed it as much as we have. I feel like we kind of started out with no real theme in mind, but as always, and as sort of, the synchronicity abounds with this show, it always kind of seems to travel together and they all kind of converge into a theme, outside of our own making, which is really cool. But we hope you've enjoyed it. And, now we got Thanksgiving coming up. We got the Christmas season coming up. So we got some really other cool things planned. And we hope you stick with us. If you want to reach out to us, you can do so over on Instagram, where the majority of our online presence is. Drop us a note in the comment section, shoot us a DM. Tell us about your own sort of paranormal or supernatural event, or even like a localized legend that maybe we've never heard of. We'd love to hear it. If it's more of a long-form thing, shoot it over to thatwouldberadpod@gmail.com, or even better, you can do so by telling that story with your own voice and maybe it being featured in a future episode. And you can do so over on our website, thatwouldberadpodcast.com, where you can leave a voice memo and maybe become part of That Would Be Rad history. If you want to support the show, buy us a coffee, get some merch, but most importantly, you can do so by joining our Patreon, The Rabbit Trail. It's just the best way to support the show, and it really means a lot to us. And we're so indebted and so grateful for you folks that, in a time where inflation is high and all that stuff, it means a lot to us that you would spend that extra shekel on supporting a show like ours. It really warms our heart. Tell a friend about the show. Go give us a 5-star review. It does a lot for the show, and I guess that's about it. You got anything else, Woody?
Well, actually, yes, I do. Have fun trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
Be safe. I'm going to post those safety rules from the 80s again on our page. Make sure you look both ways. Don't try anything homemade. If you're thinking about handing stuff out, don't home make it. It's weird.
Yeah.
Have fun. Yeah.
Right on.
What an awesome spooky season.
Yeah, dude. I'm excited about Halloween, too. It's going to be really cool. My daughter, Elliot, is dressed up as a ninja.
Nice. So, Jane's Spider-Gwen.
Oh, that's a nice one.
Woodrow's going to be like a hilarious version of Mario. He's got a t-shirt that just says, "This is my Mario costume."
Oh, that's awesome. Is he getting like a little...
Yeah. He doesn't like attention anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
So he's always kind of been like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we love you. We appreciate you. Stay spooky. And as always,
be rad.
That's the way it goes. My favorite song on the radio. black clouds in a time where I just needed some sunshine. You were already dead before you became a ghost. You always said our future would be a parade of flowers, but now all that's left is a single rose. That's the way it goes.
Access granted.
Howdy, guys, and okay. Welcome back, guy.
Oh man,
fart!
Just killing it. Welcome back, guy.
My back. Spinal.
I broke my back. And the best is like the pause of like, Mike, what happened? He waits for a minute. He's just like trying so hard to remember.
Yeah.
I broke my back.
Oh, God, it is the best. Why more people aren't talking about that video clip?
We're going to bring it back.
It is so good. Howdy, guys and gals, and welcome back to your favorite podcast, That Would Be Rad, the podcast that majors in 80s and 90s nostalgia. God almighty. I looked up and then I lost my place.
If Magic Mind, if you're listening.
Oh, man. I didn't take my Magic Mind today.
Mm-hmm.
Dang.
All right.
Actually, you know what you should do? Instead of I like how you said the spooky tale, and then I would just say of the Kelly-Hopkinsville Goblins.
Okay. The spooky tale. Said it weird. The spooky tale of the what is it?
The Kelly-Hopkinsville Goblins.
The spooky the spooky tale of the Kelly. How's it going so far, pal?
Oh, it's awesome. You're such a better reader than I am on this.
Mucho take it easy. These were hardworking people, farmers. Let me say it again. These were hardworking people, farmers, These were hardworking people, farmers, used to the. Oh my God!
I'm going to
having a
retract
stroke.
what I just said.
Yeah.